sound of a key rattling, then a sharp click. A splash erupts into slow motion, water droplets frozen mid-air. Karen's face, a mask of cold determination, catches the sun. A child's confused laughter turns to a choked gasp. The pool gate, now chained and padlocked. She taught them a lesson they'll never forget. The air hung thick with the humid perfume of a late summer afternoon, a syrupy blend of blooming jasmine and chlorine. To Karen, the scent was a cruel joke. It was supposed to be the smell of freedom and easy joy, a reward for long weeks of hard work. But for her, it had become the stench of defiance. She stood at the kitchen island, an untouched iced tea sweating beside her. The sound had been a faint ripple at first, a distant giggle carried on the breeze, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body breaking the water's surface. A sigh, heavy with exhaustion and building fury, escaped her lips. This was the third time this week. Her son Liam and her daughter Chloe had made a sport of it. The rule was simple, ironclad, and non-negotiable. No one was to use the pool without a parent present. The reasons were laid out 100 times. The risk of unsupervised swimming, the chemicals, the insurance liability, and the simple fact that a rule was a rule. But to her children, the rule was just a suggestion, a flimsy barrier to be breached with a conspiratorial glance and a whispered count of 3. She padded silently to the back door, her bare feet cool against the polished tile. She peered through the blinds, her gaze narrowing. There they were. Liam, 12 years old and gangly, was climbing out of the shallow end, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Chloe, 9, was a miniature mermaid, a blur of pink in the deeper water, her small hands holding onto the ledge as she giggled. They were happy, reckless, oblivious. The sight, instead of melting her anger, solidified it into something hard and dangerous. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It was about the profound disrespect. It was about her words, her authority, meaning absolutely nothing. The back door opened with a near-silent click, but the sudden absence of the house's hum was enough. The laughter died on the breeze, 2 pairs of eyes wide with a familiar mix of fear and defiance turned to her. "What are you two doing?" Karen's voice was low, devoid of the usual histrionics. It was worse than a shout. It was the calm before the storm. "Just cooling off, Mom," Liam said, his voice a little too casual. He wrapped a towel around his waist, as if it could shield him from the inevitable. "You know the rule," she said. "It's like 100 degrees outside," Chloe piped up, her voice a plea. "We just wanted to swim for a minute." "A minute?" Karen stepped onto the patio, the sun beating down on her shoulders. "It's never just a minute, is it? You sneak out here every single day. I told you. If you want to swim, you ask. I'll be right here to watch you. You didn't ask. You just decided that my rules don't apply to you." "You're always busy," Liam mumbled, looking at the ground. "Always on calls or doing work. We just got tired of waiting." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She felt the accusation in his tone, the passive-aggressive jab at her demanding career. She worked tirelessly to give them this house, this yard, this beautiful pool, and he had the audacity to use her hard work against her. "Is that what this is about, Liam? You think this is a punishment for me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It's a rule for your safety, not to mention the fact that this pool costs a fortune to maintain, and you treat it like your own personal watering hole." "It is our pool," Chloe whined, her lip quivering. "Daddy says so." The mention of Mark was a match to a fuse. Karen's patience, which had been stretched to the breaking point for months, snapped. "Go inside. Both of you. Now!" Her voice was a whip crack. "Take a shower, and you're both grounded. No video games, no TV, no friends, no snacks, for the rest of the week." Chloe burst into tears and scurried inside. Liam, however, stood his ground. He met her gaze with a cold, rebellious stare. That's not fair, he said, his voice flat. You're overreacting. It's just a pool. It's not just a pool, Liam. It's a lack of respect. It's you two deliberately choosing to ignore me, time and time again. I'm not overreacting. I'm setting a boundary that you refuse to acknowledge. Whatever, he said, turning on his heel and following his sister inside. He didn't slam the door, but the quiet click felt louder than any bang. Karen stood alone on the patio, the heat of the afternoon sun a stark contrast to the icy cold of her simmering rage. She walked to the edge of the pool and stared at the shimmering surface. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also a symbol of her failure, a monument to her children's blatant disregard. When Mark came home an hour later, the house was a tomb. He found Karen in the living room, a laptop open in front of her, but her eyes were fixed on nothing. He put his briefcase down and knelt beside her chair. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked gently. "I heard from Chloe that the kids are grounded." Karen took a deep breath. "They were in the pool again, Mark. I'm at my wit's end." "Sweetheart, they're just kids. It's summer, it's hot. The pool is right there." "That's the problem. You say they're just kids, and a pool is a pool. But my rules are your rules, and they're our rules. You undermine me every time with that." Attitude. You act like I'm the bad guy for trying to keep them safe and disciplined. Mark sighed, his face etched with a mix of fatigue and exasperation. "I'm not trying to undermine you, Karen. I just don't think a total lockdown is the way." "To go here." "Well, what's your solution, Mark? Because nothing I've tried has worked. They don't listen to me. They think this is a game. Well, I'm done playing." Karen closed her laptop with a decisive click. The finality of the sound hung in the air. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to solve this problem permanently." Mark looked at her, concern furrowing his brow. "Karen, what are you talking about?" "You'll see," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The resolve in her eyes was not something he recognized. It was colder, harder than he had ever seen. The next morning, Karen was up before the sun, while Liam and Chloe were still asleep in their beds, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift that was about to occur. She was on her laptop. She found what she was looking for and made a single phone call. Her voice was firm, her instructions concise. "Yes, I understand," she said into the phone. "The consultation is fine. Just get the crew out here as soon as you can. Today." Yes, today works perfectly. An hour later, as the rising sun painted the sky in streaks of pink and orange, she heard the hum of a large truck pulling up the street. She walked to the back patio and watched as two men in work boots and company t-shirts got out, their faces obscured by the early morning light. They walked to the edge of the pool, which shimmered with an almost ethereal glow, and began to unspool hoses and set up large, industrial-looking pumps. Liam was the first to notice. He walked out onto the patio, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and froze. He saw the men, the equipment, and the massive, empty tank on the back of their truck. "Mom, what are they doing?" Karen turned to him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "They're fixing our problem, sweetie." Chloe emerged from the house, her hair a mess, and her gaze followed her brother's. "Mom, are they cleaning?" "The pool?" Karen shook her head slowly. She didn't say a word. She simply watched as one of the men climbed into the shallow end with a long, wide hose and turned on a machine. The clear, pristine blue water they had so carelessly invaded yesterday began to gush from the pool into the truck, a torrent of liquid sunshine disappearing into the darkness of the metal tank. The kids' mouths fell open. The sound was a loud, sucking, industrial roar. They looked from the disappearing water to their mother's face, 1,000 questions in their eyes. But before either of them could utter a word, a different truck pulled up, one emblazoned with a picture of a flourishing garden and a stylized fish. Two more men got out. One of them carried a large, sealed black container, something that looked like a deep-sea aquarium. Liam's mind raced. He knew the pool was a source of conflict, but this was something else. He was confused, and a prickle of fear started to crawl up his neck. What was she doing? What could she possibly be doing? The second crew of men unloaded a massive pallet of gravel, stones, and strange, lumpy aquatic plants. They wheeled it past Liam and Chloe, who stood rooted to the spot, watching the beautiful, shimmering pool drain before their very eyes. The air still smelled of chlorine, but it was being replaced by the rich, earthy scent of damp soil and algae. It was the smell of a lesson that had been a long time coming. And as the second crew started to carefully arrange the stones and plants at the bottom of the now half-empty basin, Liam finally understood. He looked at his mother, the cold dread turning his stomach to ice, and the first word that came to his mind was karma. The vacuum of the pool pump was a hungry sucking sound, a mechanical monster devouring the last vestige of summer joy. Liam and Chloe stood on the patio, transfixed, their small worlds draining away before their eyes. The men from the first truck, their movements efficient and devoid of emotion, worked silently, laying the long black hose into the deepest end, guiding the water into the empty tank. It was a methodical execution, a slow, deliberate drowning of their laughter and their rebellion. Liam's mind, usually a chaotic mess of video game strategies and soccer drills, was eerily clear. He watched as the blue water receded, revealing the stained, discolored bottom of the pool. He saw the faint, faded line where the water level used to sit, a ghost of what was. Chloe's hand found his, her small fingers wrapping around his wrist. He could feel her trembling. "Mom," she whispered, her voice a fragile thing. "Mom, please stop them." Karen stood a few feet away, her posture rigid, her arms crossed over, her chest. The faint smile from before had vanished, replaced by an expression of cold, unyielding resolve. She didn't look at the kids. She watched the water, her gaze fixed on the dwindling puddle at the bottom as if to confirm her victory. "It's too late to ask for anything, Chloe," Karen said, her voice like glass, clear, sharp, and capable of cutting. "This is what happens when you decide you're above the rules." A new sound joined the roar of the pump, the grind of a hand, truck, and the scrape of gravel on concrete. The men from the second crew, the ones with the garden logo on their shirts, began to move. They wheeled large burlap bags of smooth river stones and strange, exotic-looking plants with broad, waxy leaves. Liam watched as one of them, a man with a kind face and a thick mustache, began to arrange the stones meticulously at the bottom of the now empty shallow end. "What are you doing?" Liam's voice cracked, the sound of a boy on the verge of a breakdown. "Why are you doing this?" Karen finally turned to face him, her eyes hard. "You wanted to know what I was going to do about the problem, Liam? This is it. You and your sister took what was given to you for granted. You disrespected my authority. You defied a simple rule that was meant to keep you safe. So I'm removing the source of the conflict. Since the pool is apparently a temptation you can't resist, it's no longer a pool. It's not fair." Liam's voice rose, his body shaking with a surge of impotent fury. "This isn't a lesson. This is a punishment. It's just cruel." "Cruel?" Karen scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Cruel is what happens when a child drowns in a pool because they thought they knew better than their parent. Cruel is the insurance company canceling our policy because of a liability claim. Cruel is me having to worry every single day that you'll sneak out here and hurt yourselves. This is a consequence, Liam. A real one. For a real action." Chloe started to sob openly, her small shoulders shaking. But what about our friends? We can't have parties here anymore." "Exactly," Karen said, her voice flat. "That's another consequence. Maybe now you'll understand that your choices have a ripple effect. This isn't just about you two. This is about all of us. She turned away, dismissing them, and began to give instructions to the men on the patio. Liam watched as the men in the garden shirts started to unload a series of plastic containers. Inside were small, darting shapes, flashes of orange and white. He knew what they were before he even saw the first one. Koi fish. She wasn't just turning it into a garden. She was turning it into an ornamental pond. His beautiful, shimmering, sun-drenched pool was being replaced with a stagnant, leafy fish bowl. The anger he felt was a physical thing, a hot, burning coal in his stomach. It was an injustice so profound, so absolute, that it felt like a betrayal. His mother, the person he was supposed to trust, the person who was supposed to protect him, had just destroyed something they all loved, all because of a rule they had broken. It was a cold, calculated act, and it felt infinitely worse than any grounding. Just then, the sound of a car pulling into the garage sliced through the air. Mark. Liam felt a small, desperate surge of hope. His dad would fix this. His dad would make her stop. Mark walked into the backyard, his face a mask of confusion. He saw the empty pool, the pumps, the gravel, and the strange-looking plants. He saw Karen standing by the edge, giving orders. And he saw his son and daughter, their faces streaked with tears, their bodies radiating a silent, wounded anguish. "Karen," he said, his voice quiet, dangerous. "What is going on here?" Karen turned, her expression softening just enough to be a mockery of a smile. "I told you last night, Mark. I was going to solve the problem permanently. We're installing a beautiful koi pond. It's low maintenance, it's safe, and it's a great lesson in responsibility for the kids. They can help me take care of the fish." Mark's gaze swept from the desolate pool to his children's shattered faces. You're filling in the pool?" His voice was filled with disbelief. "After a few times of them sneaking in?" "Karen, are you insane? It wasn't just a few times, Mark. It was every day. You don't know the things I've seen, the ways they've been disrespecting me," she said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "You're so busy being their friend that you don't see that they're walking all over me. And this is your solution? To destroy something they love, something that took us years to save up for just to prove a point? You're destroying a piece of our lives just to win an argument." Mark's face was a study in pure rage. He walked over to the edge of the pool, his hands balled into fists, and stared at the men working. "Stop. Just stop what you're doing right now." The men, caught between the warring parents, looked to Karen. She gave them a single hard nod. "Keep working. I'm paying you for your time." "Karen, don't," Mark said, his voice low and pleading. "Please, think about this. This is more than a lesson. It's a statement. It's a necessary step," she said, her voice steely. "I'm not backing down, Mark. I am done being the only one who cares about the rules in this house." Mark turned from the pond and faced her, his eyes blazing. He looked at her, at his children, and at the workers, and something inside him snapped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Fine, Karen. You want to make a statement? So will I." He dialed a number and held the phone to his ear, his gaze never leaving her face. "Hi, Dave. It's Mark. Remember those lawyers we talked about for the new firm? Yeah, I'm going to need one for something a little more personal. Could you recommend a good family law attorney? Someone who specializes in custody and divorce?" The words hung in the air, a final, brutal nail in the coffin of their family's summer peace. Karen's facade cracked, her eyes widening in shock. She stared at Mark, the reality of what she had set in motion crashing down on her. The pool wasn't the only thing she had just permanently destroyed. The phone dropped from Mark's ear, but he didn't hang up. The words, custody and divorce, echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. The whine of the pool pump had stopped, the last of the water siphoned away, leaving only a hollow, echoing drip from the hose. The men, now frozen in place, looked from Mark's furious, trembling face to Karen's. Karen's expression was a slow motion unraveling. The steely resolve she had clung to for days, the cold confidence of her plan, shattered. Her jaw went slack. Her eyes, previously so hard, filled with a look of profound, unadulterated shock. She looked at her husband, the father of her children, and for the first time in what felt like years, she saw a stranger. This wasn't the laid-back, peacemaking Mark she had known. This was a man on the brink, pushed past his limit, and the look in his eyes was one of finality. "Mark, what did you just do?" she whispered, the question a thin, reedy sound in the heavy silence. He finally looked at her, his gaze full of a furious, wounded grief. "What did I do? What did you do, Karen? You took a disagreement, a problem that could have been fixed with a conversation, and you turned it into this." He gestured wildly at the desolate, empty pit of the pool, and then at their children, who stood huddled together, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear. "You just drove a permanent stake through the heart of this family, and you think it's just a necessary step?" Liam, no longer able to stay silent, stepped forward. "Dad, don't do that. Please." Mark's fury momentarily deflated, replaced by a deep sorrow as he looked at his son. "I have to, buddy. Your mom. She won't listen. She thinks this is the only way." "You always say you have to fix everything," Chloe wailed, her tears renewed. "You can't fix this with a lawyer." The childish logic, the pure, unvarnished truth of it hit Karen like a slap. She looked at Mark and saw the hurt, the betrayal she had inflicted on him, and a wave of something new and terrifying washed over her, not just anger, but regret. "Mark, I didn't think—" "You didn't think?" Mark's voice was low, dangerous again. "That's the problem, Karen. You never think about the consequences for anyone but yourself. You're so focused on being right that you don't care about what's left in the wreckage." He looked at the workers, his voice regaining its authority. "Guys, you can go. I'll pay you for your time. Just send me the bill." The workers, clearly relieved to be out of the domestic war zone, scrambled to gather their equipment. The two men with the koi and the plants simply exchanged a look, shrugged, and began to put the burlap bags and containers back onto their truck. As the second truck rumbled away, Karen felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this could be salvaged. Maybe Mark was just angry. Maybe the threat was just a moment of heat. "Mark, let's talk about this. Inside. Just us." "There's nothing to talk about, Karen," he said, his voice cold. "I meant what I said. You're so desperate to prove a point to the kids that you've pushed me away. I don't recognize you anymore. And I don't want the kids to grow up thinking that this kind of cold, calculated cruelty is what love looks like." He turned on his heel and walked into the house, leaving her alone with the two shattered children. Chloe was sobbing uncontrollably now, her face buried in Liam's side. Liam, his shoulders shaking, looked at his mother with a gaze of pure, unfiltered hatred. "You're a monster," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You didn't have to do this. We would have listened. But you didn't trust us. You just wanted to hurt us." Karen recoiled as if he had struck her. His words, more than Mark's, were of physical pain. She wanted to explain, to plead, to tell him that she did this out of love, out of a desperate, panicked need to keep them safe. But the words died in her throat. There was nothing she could say that wouldn't sound like a lie. She watched as Liam led his sister into the house, their small, retreating figures a tableau of her colossal failure. She stood alone in the backyard, a ghost in her own sun-drenched sanctuary, and looked at the empty, lifeless crater that used to be a pool. It was a monument to her perfect, terrible justice, but there was no sense of triumph. Only a crushing, suffocating weight. When she went inside, the house was silent. Too silent. She found Mark in the master bedroom, a travel bag on the bed. He was methodically, almost clinically, folding clothes and placing them inside. The sight of it sent a new jolt of terror through her. This wasn't an empty threat. He was leaving. "Mark," she said, her voice a plea, "please don't do this. We can fix this. I can have the pool refilled. I can tell them I'm sorry. We can fix it." "There's no fixing this, Karen," he said without looking up. "You can't just put water back in a pool and think everything goes back to normal. The kids will never look at you the same way. I'll never look at you the same way. You showed me a side of you that I never knew existed, and it scares me. What else are you capable of doing? What else will you take away just to win an argument?" He zipped the bag closed and slung it over his shoulder. He walked past her, not even making eye contact, and went to the kids' rooms. She heard him talking to them in low, soothing tones, and then the creak of their bedroom doors closing. He came back to the main hallway, and she stood in front of him, blocking his path, tears now streaming down her face. "Where are you going?" she sobbed. "I don't know," he said, and the honesty in his voice was the most painful thing he had said all day. "I need to think. I need to be somewhere where a simple disagreement doesn't turn into a scorched earth policy." He gently moved past her, his touch so light it felt like a complete stranger's. He walked to the front door, his hand on the knob. He paused, and for a moment, Karen felt a sliver of hope that he would turn back, that he would tell her this was a mistake. Instead, he spoke, his voice quiet, but filled with an iron finality. "Don't bother calling. I need time. You think about what you've done, Karen, and you think about whether the price you paid to be right was worth it." And with that, he opened the door and walked out, leaving her alone in the silent, broken house. The faint click of the latch was the loudest sound she had ever heard, a sound that sealed her fate and left her to face the wreckage she had created alone. The silence of the house was a hollow echo of the emptiness that now existed in her life, a consequence far more punishing than anything she could have inflicted on her children. The click of the front door latch was a sound that would haunt Karen for the rest of her life. It wasn't the slamming defiance she was used to, but a quiet, final act of a door closing on her, on their life, on everything. She stood in the middle of the hallway, the silence of the house pressing down on her like a physical weight. The air, which had been thick with the charged energy of anger, was now just hollow and empty. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her mind, so busy with the logistics of her perfect plan, was now a blank slate. There was no triumph, no sense of satisfaction, only a cold, sick dread coiling in her gut. She had won the battle, but she had just lost the war. The victory was ashes in her mouth. She finally moved, her legs feeling heavy, as if she were wading through water. She went to the patio door and looked out at the backyard. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the desolate crater that used to be their pool. The apathetic, brown soil, the scattered stones, and the pathetic little containers of koi fish looked ridiculous now, a childish act of spite rather than a grand, unassailable lesson. It wasn't a punishment. It was a scar, a permanent, ugly mark on the landscape of their family. A faint sound from inside the house jolted her back to reality. The kids. She had to talk to them. She had to explain. She didn't even know what she had to do. The logical, pragmatic part of her brain, the part that had planned every detail of this ill-fated lesson, had nothing to offer now. This wasn't a problem with a simple solution. This was a fracture, a break so deep it might never heal. She walked to the kids' rooms, her heart pounding a panicked rhythm against her ribs. She paused at Liam's door, which was slightly ajar. She pushed it open slowly. The room was dark, the blinds drawn. Liam was sitting on his bed, his back to her, headphones on, staring at a blank wall. His whole body radiated a silent, seething anger. She could feel it, the heat of his resentment from the doorway. "Liam?" she said softly. He didn't move. The silence was absolute, save for the faint, tinny sound of the music from his headphones. He had them on loud enough for her to know he was intentionally ignoring her. "Liam, please take those off," she said, her voice a little firmer now, a desperate grasp for control. He didn't acknowledge her. He didn't even twitch. It was as if she were a ghost, an apparition he had decided to look straight through. "Your dad will be back," she said, her voice cracking slightly. He's just taking some time to cool down. We'll talk. We'll fix this." The words felt hollow, even to her. She knew they were lies. They both knew they were lies. She moved to Chloe's room. Her daughter was curled up in a tight ball on her bed, her face buried in a pillow. She wasn't sobbing anymore. She was just still, motionless. Karen sat on the edge of the bed and gently placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Chloe flinched, away from her touch as if it were a brand. "Chloe," Karen whispered. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you so much, and I was so worried about you two being out there alone." Chloe didn't say anything, but her small body shook with a single silent shudder. She turned just enough for Karen to see one eye, red and swollen from crying, watching her with a look of pure, unadulterated fear. It was the same look she had seen in Liam's eyes when he called her a monster. "I just wanted to teach you a lesson about listening to me," Karen said, her voice breaking. "You're the one who needs a lesson." Chloe's small voice was muffled by the pillow, but the words were a hammer blow. "You're the one who didn't listen to Dad." Karen reeled back as if struck. The innocence of the accusation, the simple, unassailable logic of it, was more devastating than any adult's rage. Chloe was right. Karen hadn't listened to anyone. She had been so consumed with her own sense of injustice and her need to be right that she had plowed ahead, deaf to Mark's pleas and blind to the pain she was causing her children. She had built this monument to her own self-righteousness, and it had crumbled into dust, taking everything she held dear with it. She left Chloe's room and walked into the living room, the space that had once felt so warm and welcoming now, a cavern of isolation. She sank onto the couch, her phone in her hand, the screen glowing with a new notification. It was an email from the pool draining company. She had asked them to send an invoice. It was a detail she had needed to handle before Mark had walked out. The subject line read, "Invoice for pool draining and maintenance." She opened it, her hands trembling. She skimmed the document, her eyes scanning for the total. It was a 3-figure number, just as she had expected. But then she noticed a separate, smaller line item at the bottom, a note about a final quote for a new service, an add-on she had requested during her phone call this morning, a detail she hadn't mentioned to Mark. The line item was for the aquatic bioremediation and refill service. The note stated that the reversal of the pond-to-pool conversion would require specialized equipment and a new permit from the city due to the introduction of non-native species and the alteration of the water's chemical composition. The quote for this reversal, for undoing what she had just done, was 6 figures. A number so large it was more than their combined annual salaries, a number that would require them to sell the house to afford, a number that would financially ruin them. The shock was a physical wave. She stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. She had been so focused on teaching them a lesson about consequences, a lesson she believed she could control, that she had completely overlooked the unforeseen, catastrophic consequences of her own actions. The solution she had enacted was irreversible. She couldn't just refill the pool. The simple, elegant fix she had pleaded for moments ago was a financial impossibility. She looked at her empty house, at the children who now feared and resented her, and at the financial ruin she had just brought down on them all. It wasn't a consequence for a broken rule. It was a consequence for her pride. And the universe, in its own cold, ironic way, had delivered its final perfect verdict. She thought she had taught her kids a lesson they would never forget. But, in the end, it was she who had learned the most devastating lesson of all. The sun, which had been a warm, comforting presence all afternoon, now felt like a spotlight, harsh and unforgiving, as it cast a final, long shadow over the barren hole in the backyard. The koi fish, in their plastic tubs, were a pathetic, silent audience to the destruction. Karen stood alone, the email invoice glowing on her phone, a perfect symbol of her financial and emotional ruin. Her mind, a whirlwind of frantic planning just hours ago, was now a stagnant pool of dread. She felt a hollowness in her chest, a complete absence of the righteous fury that had fueled her. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, numbing horror. She had wanted to teach a lesson, to make her children see the consequences of their actions. But she had been so focused on the children that she had completely missed the gaping hole in her own logic, her own pride. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about her, and the price she had paid to be right was everything. A faint sound from the front of the house broke through her stupor. A car door. Her heart leaped, a flicker of desperate, irrational hope. Mark. He had come back. He had just been bluffing. He wouldn't leave her. Not like this. She dropped her phone on the patio table and rushed to the front door, her breath ragged. She pulled it open, her face a mask of pleading, but it wasn't Mark. It was her neighbor, Jessica. Jessica stood there, her hands shoved. In the pockets of her jeans, a look of profound discomfort on her face. Her kind, usually smiling eyes were filled with a mixture of pity and concern. "Hey, Karen," Jessica said, her voice soft. I saw the trucks leave, and then I saw Mark's car leave. Is everything okay?" Karen's face, which had been contorted with frantic hope, crumpled. The lie died in her throat. She couldn't pretend. Not to Jessica, who had been her confidant and friend for years. "No," Karen choked out, her voice a whisper. "No, it's not okay. I did something terrible, Jess. Something really, really stupid." Jessica stepped forward and wrapped her in a gentle, comforting hug. Karen, who had been so strong, so rigid in her convictions, broke. She sobbed into Jessica's shoulder, the tears, a hot, cleansing river of shame and regret. She told Jessica everything. The sneaking, the pool, the anger, Mark's threat, the invoice, the financial ruin. She left nothing out. The raw, unfiltered truth tumbled out of her like a waterfall. When she was finished, Jessica pulled back, holding her at arm's length, her eyes searching Karen's face. "Oh, Karen," she said, her voice thick with empathy. "I'm so sorry. I know you were just trying to do what you thought was right, but you went too far. You always do." The words, "you always do," struck Karen with a new kind of pain. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, sorrowful fact. Jessica wasn't condemning her. She was observing a pattern. The realization was a devastating one. Her need for control, for absolute authority, had been a poison in their lives for years, and she had just paid the ultimate price. Jessica stayed for an hour, talking her through the shock, helping her to see that this wasn't the end, just a terrible, painful turning point. She offered to let the kids stay with her for a while, to give everyone space. Karen, humbled and stripped of all her pride, agreed. "Just tell them I'll call them later," Karen said, her voice hoarse. "Tell them I love them." Jessica nodded, her expression grim but determined. She walked into the house, and Karen, standing on the porch, heard the faint, soothing tones of Jessica's voice and the quiet, muffled responses of her children. A few minutes later, Jessica emerged, her arm around Chloe's small shoulders. Liam followed, his face still a stone mask, but his steps were no longer as heavy. They got into Jessica's car and drove away, a small, somber procession that felt like a funeral. Karen went back into the silent house. She went to the master bedroom where the empty space on Mark's side of the bed was a physical ache. She lay down, her body curled into a small, shivering ball, and she finally, truly, grieved. She wasn't just grieving the loss of her husband and the love of her children. She was grieving the person she had been, the woman who had thought her will was law, the person who had driven everyone she loved away in her quest to be right. She lay there for hours, the light from the setting sun giving way to the cold blue glow of the moon. She didn't have the energy to get up, to eat, to do anything. She just lay there, the weight of her choices a crushing burden. The silence of the house was punctuated only by the distant sounds of cicadas and the occasional car driving by. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the stillness. The faint but unmistakable sound of a phone ringing. Her phone, the one she had left on the patio table. It was ringing insistently, a demanding, jarring sound. She dragged herself out of bed and went to the patio door. The phone screen was lit up, a single name glowing brightly on the screen. It was Mark. A wave of relief so powerful it made her dizzy washed over her. He was calling. He was coming back. She was right. He had just been angry. She picked up the phone, her hand shaking. "Mark?" she whispered, her voice full of a desperate, pleading hope. "Mark, where are you? Please, just come home. We can talk." There was a long pause on the other end, so long that Karen thought the call had dropped. And then she heard his voice. But it wasn't the voice she was expecting. It wasn't angry or sad. It was calm, measured, deliberate. "Karen," he said, and the way he said her name was a new kind of cold. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not coming home. I'm at the police station." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her heart, which had been beating so frantically with hope, now stopped dead in her chest. "The police? Mark? What? Why?" she stammered, her mind racing. "What could he have done? Was it something to do with the pool? With the workers?" "I've just filed a restraining order against you," he said, his voice a flat, emotionless drone. "I'm worried about the kids. The lawyer said this was the first step. You're not to have any contact with me or them until the custody hearing. Don't call me. Don't come near me. And for God's sake, don't try to talk to the kids." The phone clicked. Off. And Karen was left in the dark, silent house, a fresh wave of terror and shock washing over her. This wasn't a punishment. This was a legal action. A new, terrifying reality. She thought she had lost her family to her pride, but she was just now realizing how much more she had to lose. Her perfect, calculated lesson had not just cost her a pool. It had cost her freedom. It had cost her everything. And the real Bruta.